Is Seattle worth living in even after COVID-19? And is Seattle dying? This will be a two-part video series where today I'll explore some of the ways Seattle has changed for the worse since 2020. And I'll also talk about some of the many things that may cause people to hesitate before moving here. For this video, I'll address the rising crime, homelessness, the justice system, the housing market, and weather to help answer if Seattle is still worth living in today. I'm a current Seattle resident, and though I have an overall positive view of the city, this video will address some of the major problems in the city that are causing many residents to pack their bags and leave. In the past few years, Seattle has received a blast from the past, but in the worst way possible. Today, we have the highest crime rate in the city since the 1990s. And it takes only one look at Seattle's crime statistics to see that since COVID-19, there's been an uptick in all forms of crime. In this chart, before COVID-19, there was a trailing 5-year average of around 42,800 crimes committed per year. Meanwhile, since COVID, that number has jumped to 45,500. Approximately 88% of these are property crime, and 12% are the more serious violent crime, such as aggravated assault and armed robbery. For comparison, our crime rate is actually higher than that of Chicago. According to US News, in Seattle, you have a 27% higher chance of becoming the victim of a violent crime than in Chicago. And you have over a 100% higher chance of being a victim of property crime than in Chicago. Although overall, Seattle's violent crime average is actually below the national average. On the other hand, our property crime rate is higher than the national average. Of course, take these numbers with a grain of salt. Chicago may have a bad reputation, but it's one of the safer large cities in the US. Outside of crime rate, one of the sad things about Seattle is that you'll often read these headlines about how Seattle juries and judges acquit violent criminals or simply release repeat offenders on bail. Even if you're against putting people in prison, you've got to admit that it's a bad idea to send violent individuals or repeat offenders back into the city. Sometimes I wonder if these articles are just sensational, but there has to be a grain of truth. On the flip side, it also doesn't help seeing news of how some of our law enforcement act. If you live in Seattle and you want to stay happy, it's probably best to avoid any news about our justice system. But even if you visit Seattle, chances are still relatively low that you're actually a victim of a crime. If you're visiting and are concerned, just look at a heat map of crimes committed in the city. It's released by the city government and gives a good idea of our safest neighborhoods. But even if you don't encounter crime, there's still a high chance of encountering another issue, which is homelessness. According to US News, we have the third highest homeless population of all major cities. There are approximately 12,000 homeless in Seattle, and only Los Angeles and New York, cities that are more than 10 times the size, beat Seattle out in terms of homeless population. So why are there so many homeless people? Some say rising housing costs has driven people out of their homes. Some say drug addiction and mental health. Some say poor life choices. And some would claim that states such as Texas are actually sending homeless over on a one-way bus ticket. It really depends on who you ask or which news outlet you go to. But if you ask me, it's most likely a combination of a little bit of each. If global warming has done anything good, it's given Seattle more 70-degree days than usual. It also has consequently given higher chances of forest fires. Combine that with bad forest management these past 100 years, and you can get some pretty bad forest fires. While Seattle's air is some of the cleanest in the nation, every once in a while, a wind will blow smoke from a forest fire to Seattle and give us some of the worst air quality in the world. Just this past September, there was a week period where the outside world smelled like smoke. It was as if the entire Seattle area was invited to the same campfire. Except we couldn't see the fire and none of us had the option to leave. On the bright side, if there is a bright side, these forest fires can actually lead to some great sunset photo opportunities. So if it's any consolation, at least you can enjoy the sunsets. Despite the higher average temperatures, Seattle is still a very cloudy city with only 43% of the year experiencing some kind of sun. Now, I say cloudy and not rainy because despite its reputation, Seattle gets about the same amount of rain as the US average. We don't really get rain, we mostly get a continuous drizzle with non-stop cloud cover. So outside of the summer months, and in between November through March, you better bring your vitamin D or a sun lamp because it can get dark. Couple this with shorter days, and if you work full time, there can be weeks at a time you don't see the sun. To be fair though, personally I kind of like the cloudy weather. It's the perfect chance to drink some coffee and read a book or watch a movie. But if you like the sun or have seasonal affectiveness disorder, you might not want to move to Seattle, or you might want to think pretty heavily on whether or not you could live without the sun. Want to buy a house in Seattle? Well, good luck! Even if the housing market is cooling down, the average Seattle home sells for $840,000. This is up 5% year over year since last year. For better reference, in 2010, the average Seattle home price was $400,000. In other words, in the past 12 years, we've seen housing costs double. So even if we see a large drop in housing prices, I doubt we'll ever go back to where we were just 10 years ago. And rent isn't doing much better. In 2010, rent was around $1,000 per month. Today, it's closer to $2,300 a month. Whether you rent or buy, Seattle housing can make you feel the pain. And that's it for this video. Most of the topics that I had to talk about were things that I felt were getting worse over the coming years. There are many other things such as the traffic, maybe a lack of diversity in Seattle that you might consider reasons why not to move here. But I just wanted to cover the 4 or 5 top things that really prevent people from moving here. If you agree with me or disagree with me, let me know down in the comments. And don't worry for those of you who got a little sad after watching this. Next week, I'll be uploading a video with reasons to move to Seattle. Overall, these are actual concerns that I do have about the city. If you live downtown, then it's blatantly obvious that we have a homeless issue. There are high rent prices, the winter weather can actually wear you down, and these are just things that I think you really need to know before you decide to move here permanently, or if you want to take a vacation. Overall, I still think Seattle is an amazing place to visit, and next week, I'll talk a little bit more about the good things and the positives about the Seattle area. But anyway, that's the end of this video. Let me know down in the comments what I missed, and let me know what you like or dislike about Seattle. Anyway, I hope you leave a like and subscribe, and with that, I'll see you in the next video.
The other piece of my heart moves slow, somewhere in the great unknown. When I return from the afterglow, will you carry me like I am?